Hey guys, welcome back to a new video. In today's video, I want to show you guys 3 Reddit stories I found. So sit back and relax and enjoy. The village I grew up in isn't normal as I thought it was. Hello, last September I finally moved out of my tiny village to go to university half the country away. It's a 5-hour drive away from home, which I know is very little to Americans, in the middle of a huge city, and could not be further from the kind of place I'm used to living in. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a hobbit. I've left my village plenty of times, but the lived experience, the shape of daily life and goings on, has completed culture shock, positively, negatively, and everywhere in between. This much though I expected, I knew it was gonna be a plunge. It's the kind of why I chose where I did. I was at least lucky enough to have housemates and course mates alike that grew up in a little village all over the country and beyond, to share and confide in during the complete tunnel shifts of our lives. But I'm starting to realize aspects of my childhood and growing up where I did aren't as universal as I previously thought they were. Weird things happen in my village, things different to the weird things I'm sure also happen in cities. I've always assumed that stuff that happened to and around me whilst I was growing up was the kind of weirdness that happened in every place that was hours odd drive from population century above 1,000. But apparently not. I've shared a couple stories with my uni friends that I thought were regular just to receive the most confused looks, laughs as if I'm joking, and genuine concern. One of my friend directed me here, said there's plenty of people on this sub that would get some enjoyment out of some of the weird shit I remember. So that's what I'm here to do. I've included the ones that I've told people so far below. But even as I type these out, I start remembering some other stuff, so you might hear from me again soon. The house I grew up in was on the edge of the village, specifically on the edge that had let out the farmland and fields for miles and miles. Our back garden was quite small and there was very little to do in the village, so often my dad and I would go for walks in the fields and just play. Sometimes we took a ball, sometimes we found sticks and played whatever imaginary game I fancied. Sometimes we just explored a new path, probably regular father and son stuff, I guess. We had done the latter that day after climbing a small fence and finding a path through some new field we hadn't gone through before. I know a new field doesn't sound exactly exciting, but there was something about the middle of nowhere English countryside I couldn't really explain. When you put your back to the village and go far away enough from any straight back roads, you suddenly become very aware you are somewhere very old. I even remember feeling it back then as a kid, before I could really put my finger on it. You'd realize looking at a land that hadn't changed in a very, very long time. Longer than some of the countries you guys reading this have officially been around. There's an energy to it just underneath the surface, and being amongst it makes you understand how people could be superstitious, thinking fate or other mythological existed beyond our lights and walls. It makes you understand how some people could think magic was real. We had to walk for a while when we reached a nearly outgrown field, all the wild grass flowing gold in the late sun. I'm guessing an out of season cattle pasture, with a clutch of huge bushes in the center that looked like there was a hole leading into it. My dad pointed it out to me, lifted me on his shoulder so I could see it over the grass, before excitedly declaring we had to see inside. I remember I was interested, but also scared. The field straddled a light hill, with a bush cover at the peak. The way the blue sky backdropped the crest of the hill made it look like the edge of the world. We went away from it. It took some time wading through the grass, almost taller than me, as the faded path veered off some other direction. The first thing I remembered was the smell. it hit us halfway through the grass, sort of an edgy and clothy. My dad made a fart joke about it, telling me before it's just animal poop. There's probably a few fox or rabbit holes in here. Before he ducked inside a little cover entrance, I followed him and remember thinking that inside it was as cool as I hoped it would be. A portion of the large molding of needles, such as growing over it, but the rest was flat-shaped, shaded patches of grass that the bushes fully encapsulated, almost like the igloo of leaves. The gold of the days came through as patchwork patterns that waved along the floor in a strong wind, and I looked for animal burrows but couldn't find any. Couldn't find much about the sulfury smell before I was distressed by my dad. He was crouched in front of the mound and wandered over my eyes. Continued to adjust to the shade, peering over the heaped earth before my dad was metal rusted and girdled in the cohesive shape. I imitated his awe with something akin to a wow, but honestly I had no clue what I was looking at it. It was cinder-like, but mostly buried under the earth. All we could see was a rounded corner of a one, and a sort of thick pipe. On top of that looked like a unearthed drain cover. The curved side of the cylinder was semi-visible, the earth giving away in a diagonal strip between the face and the tube, but the rest remained buried. I think it's an old tank, my dad said, preempting the question he knew I was going to ask. Now I was young, and had played a lot of video games by this point. I'm pretty sure my only run in the word tank then was Halo CE, so I remembered assuming he meant the kind of tank, meaning childhood me was even more amazed. I immediately went to touch it, but my dad stopped me and pointed to the brown and orange layer of rust that clung to it like a coral. It's very old and very rusty. It could break if we touched it. And rusty metal makes for bad cuts. I remember nodding before asking, do you think it went underwater? I really don't know why I asked this, but I remember asking it vividly. I could assume I was young enough to know that the concept of submarine wasn't enough to distinguish it from a tank. But I do have a very excited memory of picturing the field underwater at one point. My dad just gave me the usual diplomatic maybe response of a parent not knowing what the fuck their child is talking about. We left shortly after talking about it on the way home. Naturally, I bragged about it to my friends the next day, a real-life tank buried in the field that may or may not been under the ocean, that only I had seen. They didn't believe me even after swearing it on my mother, so we decided to walk after school, 5 of us. I almost forgot the way and claimed all the I bet you X, Y, and Z, there's nothing there, were coming out. But eventually we reached the field with a bush cover a stop at the hill. The edge of the world was somewhere else this time. Instead of a formless gray malice of cloud hangover, no gold that day. I remember them being as silent as I was when I first saw it, but it was just loudly gladding that time. The smell hit again, way worse this time, and it echoed my dad's settlement again about animals and the kind of jokes they started making. The fingers pointed from one another, jokingly accused each other of farting. One of them went to say my dad and I came here to go to the toilet as we ducked one by one, but they trailed off as we laid eyes on the tank. That's not a tank. One bitterly after another, a moment of quiet of awe. But when I stubbornly asked what was it, they quietly shrugged. One of my friends went up and tried to touch it. I spoke out like my dad, parroting his exact words this time. But he didn't stop. He looked at me for a moment before crouching down in front of it. I cried out for him to wait. I tried to grab his arm, but his small fist knocked the metal 3 times before I couldn't stop him. We all heard it echo dully inside, standing in a silent anticipation to see what comes next. Nothing at all. Nothing at first. The kid who knocked spoke first, laughed while saying, "Your dad's a wuss. Nothing's gonna," before cut off by 3 loud knocks, returning from the inside of the tank. We all ran out, yelling almost immediately. The two scared boys running half away down the field. We sat and watched from the tall grass for a while, but nothing happened, even as we got closer again and crept back in through the cave entrance. After a while, the kid who knocked before becoming emboldened again and went to knock. The two scared boys yelling out for him to stop. The same 3 loud taps rang again, and we all held our breaths for a moment. Sure enough, it sang through loudly once again. We ran back out. Not as far this time, just the entrance in case anything happened, but nothing did. He went up for the 3rd time, and I remember he did the pattern. As the 2 kids started to get increasingly panicked, the remaining kids, other than me, tentatively walked up to join him, asking for his turn next. I stood between the 2 pairs, terrified but curious. The tone came back through perfectly, causing one of them, scared ones, to start crying. The other threatened to go home to tell his parents. The first to knock begged them to not to, told them they leave in a second, but was cut off. The boy waiting for his turn had begun to scream. He pressed his hand flat against the curve of the buried metal cylinder, and from the way he began to lash out against the mound, he could not remove it. The sulfur smell doubled in intensity, and horrible hissing sound joined it. The scared 2 were running in an instant out and down through the grass as one of them cried out in terror tears, and my other friends ran to the stuck one in the tank, desperately grabbing his arm and trying to pull it away. The boy was kicking and screaming, incoherently crying for help, as smoke and steam, or something else, poured out from the edges of his hands, and I remember looking down and stopping for a moment, realizing that the metal beneath his hand was beginning to glow hot from a terrible heat. I swear I could feel it from there. The smell was joined by the cooking of flesh. I don't remember how long it took to remove his hands from the tank, probably only a few seconds, but I don't remember much. After looking at his hands, I remember walking through the fields as he babbled and cried. I remember looking down at his hands and wanting to throw up. I remember not seeing the other 2 friends until the next day. I remember our house was closest to the field, so we took him there, and my mom phoned his. After calling the ambulance, I remember we lied as well. I really don't know why. I guess we thought we did something wrong, and tried to make it seem less so. We said it was friction burned from rope swings we went to sometimes, which must have worked to some degree, but no one asked us any more questions. Maybe they knew we did something stupid, and this would dissuade us from doing it again. They were only half wrong if it was the case. I had nightmare for a long time about going back to the tank and seeing the layers of hands that fused to the tank still being there, sizzling away. The friend who got burned came back into school a couple weeks later. His hands still wrapped for a while, though. We didn't stay friends after primary school. He went to private school, I think, but for the rest of our time knowing each other, none of us spoke about the tank again, although I've went to the field since on dog walks. The bush cove still sits there. The smell latched faintly to the wind sometimes, and I'm sure someone has or will wander in there again at some point. I remember I told my mom the truth after events recently, many years after the fact. She seemed very vaguely remembered, but when I finished the story, she didn't seem particularly surprised or shocked. Just said, "Well, I'm sure that taught you not to go touching stuff you shouldn't have." In all honesty, it really didn't. I think about a year after the tank incident, they started to build wind turbines in some of the further outfields, far enough that I don't remember walking out that far, but close enough that they created the horizon and loomed amongst the village. There was the outrage I'm sure every village went through when the wind farms started to go up across the country. People suddenly became very opinionated about things they didn't know a lot about. I remember thinking it was all silly as a kid when a local, who as far as I remembered had no credentials besides just being old and angry, spoke at our school about us kids should be against it. I just thought they looked cool, but I don't recall really caring either way. I do remember going home and seeing my grandfather was visiting. I wanted to know if all the people just had natural vendettas against wind farms, so I asked him if she was angry about it. I don't care what they build. Doesn't matter what I think. If they're going to build it anyways, I just wish they would build somewhere else, she grunted. I remember her jaw jittering with frustration as she did. I asked if they were too close. To us? Oh no, not too close, no. Just place silly to put him. When I asked her why, she leaned forward in her chair to get closer to my face, giving a creaking whisper. That out there is fairyland. Mustn't go where they dance now. I was already scared of my great-grandma. I was kind of scared the very old people when I was young. And this didn't help, and I remember running away and trying to forget the words, and the bits she muttered as I felt. Something about circles, the wind farms, started construction properly soon after. But bad news started coming from the site pretty quickly. The turbines had been the talk of the village, including our school. It wasn't just the weird assemblies with people talking about them and for and against them. The huge lorries infuriating the colossal stems and blades passed through our tiny quiet village, right past the front of the schools as we were filtering in the start of the day. One of the older boys claimed his father worked at the site and jumped on the buzz of excitement to garner some popularity. The first few days were just bragging about how cool it was and normal kid stuff, but soon it got weird. The way he described it, or at least the way he described his father describing it, was that one of the turbines was haunted naturally, and his dad had told him any stories from the site. All the others went up to him with no delay or setbacks, but one of the other days he brought the story of the Portillos locked their occupants in. Wires would be cut, excavator fuel tanks were found filled with leaves and chestnuts, tidbits that felt straight from fairy tales that whipped through things up. Dismaying, but I loved the ideas of ghosts as a kid and was set on it being real no matter what. So every day I'd run over to hear new crazy stories from the wind turbine sites. Ladders disappearing from underneath workers, ring of mushrooms and flowers showing up across the site, bursting from the ground overnight. I remember one of the stories that gave me nightmares for a few days. A worker last to leave the site at twilight looks up to the turbine, at this point a good 50 meters high, and sees that the shape of a person peering over the incomplete neck before quickly ducking away. The boy told us a few times for trying to scare the lower classes, but instead he wasn't lying. The gathering became more coherent, or covert, heading from the teachers to break time and swearing secrecy. As usual, I went home and told my parents, half in awe and half in fear. They told to calmly explain that if it was true, it was probably just protesters trying to cause disruptions. My great-grandma was staying with us again, as she did it a lot towards the end, interjected from the other room. Sounds like they broke a fairy circle to me. My mother chided her, as her not trying to scare me further. I didn't hear the rest after running away to play with my toys and describe myself from her words. The older boy came with a new story a few days later. I remember he seemed as scared as that time. His dad had gone to leave for work to find his car turned upside down. It was just sat there on its roof. No noise, no alarm. The village was way too safe for cameras or anything, so there was no evidence of the crime, save the crime itself. So I confirmed this story, if it wasn't any other, was 100% as truthful as I saw the picture in the monthly newsletter sometime after. Either way, on the day he was shaken, said he worried the ghost had followed his dad home. He didn't come for school for at least a little bit after that, but the next day we didn't hear from him, As it reached the county news, someone had fallen to their death from the top of the almost complete turbine. He was performing some urgent work on the exterior, and his safety harness, plus both of his cables, spontaneously failed. No sign of breakage, and two other workers on standby at the top said he made no move to unclip himself. One moment he was there, the second he was falling away, the third he hit the ground below. Although it was almost complete, work was halted for a few days until complete investigation and safety analysis could be complete. The investigation as well as the construction of the turbine never was conducted. My dad woke me up in the middle of the night, ushering me to come and see. I didn't understand at first, but I obligated as he gently tugged my arm. He guided me to the spare room at the back of the house, where, bringing the day, you could see the heads of the turbine just crescent over the house. At night they stood unseen, save for the heartbeat pulse of a red light. Upon the complete turbines, the blinds were open and my mother was standing on the spare bed, hand over her mouth. The trouble bladeless turbine was ablaze. There was a dim orange glow that clung to the street still wet from earlier rain, and I could see the faint silhouette of people watching from the street, cast in amber. The flickering light shaded the smoke pouring from it, framing the embedded turbine head over the dirty orange smudge in otherwise pitch black sky. I don't remember how long we watched. It raged for most of the night, and we sat and watched quietly until whatever flame fed on choked out and turned to embers, still visible like a cigarette cherry floating in the sky. I kept watching from the ambient light of the fire died. After my parents went to bed, I swore I could see things moving around the ambered stem. I kept rubbing my eyes thinking it was just me being tired, but I swear they were there. Tiny lights in the sky around where the turbine was blazing in and out as they danced around in the distance. It wasn't just the stars being dragged down to the horizon, nor the guiding lights of the turbine companions. They seemed to collide and merge and split and play. I was memorized, and I would go back every so often at night to see it, if I could see them there again, but I never did. I told my parents, who I know didn't believe me. Even they said how awesome it sounded. When my grandma heard it, though, she smiled and said, "I told you they were fairyland." The turbine is still up, motionless next to its finished kin. I'm guessing they tried to take it down and repair it, but it had more of the elevating mischief occur. As far as I'm aware, no solid cause for the fire or death was found, but I can't find any solid records beyond local news on earlier. But we still called it the candle, and it could still see from the fair room whenever I visit. I leave it there for now so it doesn't get too long. I've got another 2 hyped up that I'll be posting in coming days. Hope you enjoyed recounting thus far. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm currently back after being sick. I lost my voice and I wasn't able to really record that well without my voice cracking. So I just really want to thank you guys for your patience and everything. A new video is going to be out tomorrow. This one I have planned is going to be a really longer one of the Reddit stories, because the ones I really found just got, I don't know, they got removed. But again, thank you guys so much for your patience. New video next week, and we're going to continue the same schedule as always. Bye guys, love you.